This is the Court Leader's Advantage, a podcast series for court professionals and by court professionals. Brought to you by thecourtleader.net and in cooperation with NACM, the National Association for Court Management. The world-renowned technology advisory firm, the Gartner Group, has come out with its 9 future work trends for 2024. These are trends that Gartner has said will reshape the future of work. They are driven by the need to attract and retain top talent, to reduce operational costs, and to enhance productivity. The 9 trends are: skills will become more important than degrees and certificates in recruitment and selection. Career stereotypes will collapse in the face of a changing workforce. Employee conflict resolution will be the next must-have management skill. The cost of work crisis will reach a breaking point as employees calculate the cost of traveling every day to and from a brick-and-mortar courthouse. The 4-day work week becomes routine. We'll stop talking about DEI. It'll just become the way we work. Generative artificial intelligence experiments will likely yield hard lessons and painful costs. These experiments will emphasize the need for good training in how to use generative AI. Artificial intelligence will create work opportunities. Entirely new classes of specialists will be needed to effectively use AI. And climate change protection will become the new must-have employee benefit. We'll only have enough time to delve into a couple of these trends in today's episode. We'll look at the shifting focus from degrees and certificates to skills and competencies. This approach will allow for a more inclusive and diverse workforce by using practical skills and experience over formal education and training. We'll look at one specific future skill that will be in high demand, that being workplace mediation. As workplaces become more diverse and remote work continues to grow, misunderstandings and conflicts will also likely grow. Effective mediation will be essential to keep an organization working smoothly. I'm Pete Kiefer, and welcome to the Court Leader's Advantage podcast series. This month, we're going to take a look at the job skills of the future and how we're going to find candidates that possess them. Here to discuss these questions are Hillary Galen, certified coach, trainer, facilitator, and organizational consultant. Tim Rupert, Human Resources Officer with the Municipal Court in Toledo, Ohio. Jason James, Court Administrator with the Municipal Court in Dalton, Georgia. Dana Bartocci, Human Resources and Development Director with the Minnesota Judicial Branch in St. Paul, Minnesota. And Jamie Velasquez, Organizational Development Analyst with the Superior Court in Orange County, California. Thank you all for joining today's podcast. If skills are going to replace degrees and certificates as the new selection criteria, how are we going to assess candidates' skills? If we concentrate on leadership skills like creativity, problem solving, and critical thinking, what are we going to be looking for? Jamie?
Well, I love this shift because I think it addresses what I've heard referred to as the paper ceiling, which is the idea that credentials or the paper you get when you graduate with that college degree make you valid. So I think it's a wonderful shift to really get at the skills and competencies that we want in leaders and just employees in general. So how do we do it? I think we do it with really good questions. I think we do it with that whole shift of situational questions, behavioral interviews, tell me about a time when, get those stories to see how they do things, and really delve into those knowledge, skills, and attitudes that we want in our employees, as opposed to just looking at certifications or degrees or things that you can sign up, get, and not necessarily learn from. And so I love this shift.
Dana?
I also love this question like Jamie does, and I want to take it back a few steps. Not only how do we interview, but how do we decide what we need for the positions? Often what happens when there's an opening, there's a rush to fill. Oh, I've got to fill this. Where's my job posting from last time? Let's put it up. And somebody might try to slow that process. A manager, a human resources person, an organizational effectiveness person might stop and say, what do you really need? And that's really the cue to figure out what are the skills, knowledge, and ability that is really needed for this today and not last year and not pre pandemic, and flesh out what it would take to be successful. And oftentimes that can eliminate that paper ceiling because you're putting words to what are the skills you need: communication. Okay, tell me more about communication. Well, why do they need communication? And thinking about the customers we serve, everyone who comes into our courts, or maybe they're serving judges, and really talking about these things. So, as someone who is a leader in the court, taking a moment rather than just saying, we got to fill this position, we don't have time to do that, but take it a step back and say, what are really the skills we're looking for? So, when we get into the interview, we're able to assess for those skills that are needed to be successful today.
Can you give me an example of the kinds of questions that we could ask to delve into a candidate's thinking regarding these skills and allow us to get past canned responses?
So one of the things we recently did in an interview for a supervisor position is we had them role play a difficult conversation. So we had actors come in and be those wonderful, complex human beings that we work with and banter back. And we had a couple people say, I thought this is what I wanted, but this isn't what I wanted. And so they were able to actually do it in real time and experience it. So it was both a give and a get. We saw how they dealt with it, but they also saw kind of what's really behind the position. I think some of those good questions, I think it's just like Dana said, you have to figure out, what do you really want? What are those great questions where you can see lots of different competencies come out because you're watching how they get there? And so it's not the patent questions. You have to kind of get them to, they have to walk you to their response, and really show you how they get there in the different ways.
Okay.
I'm also a
Well,
proponent of providing interview questions in advance. I'm a big extrovert who thinks on my feet. And so sometimes for me, I love getting them there. And, it might give me an advantage if I don't get them ahead of time. But for someone, if you really want to dig in, providing a question about, tell me about a time where you mediated a conflict between two people, give an example and share the result. And allowing someone to think and process that is really important, so you do get to the heart of how they solved it rather than are they quick on their feet. Now, you might want to ask some other questions that you don't give in advance to see if they can think quick on their feet, if that is an important part of the job. So, thinking about, to get to those good answers, give lead time so people can provide experiences that really match what you're looking for in the position.
And Pete, if I can just chime in here with one other thought, I'm so much aligned with what both of you have said. The other piece that I think tends to get neglected in that rush to get to the interview is, let's design a rating system ahead of time. What does a good answer sound like? What does an answer where they're flubbing it sound like? And train all of the people who will be in the interviewing process so that there's unanimity, and along the way, possibly refining of the questions as you go.
I agree with that too. And I think that's especially important with diversity, equity, and inclusion. A lot of people like, what questions do I ask? That's the first step. It's, how do you know if it's a good response to that question? And that takes a more thoughtful approach.
Now, for as long as I can remember, procedural knowledge in court operations has been a priority, even when hiring for court management jobs. If interpersonal skills becomes more sought after, what will this do to candidates with knowledge of court operations? Will those candidates be edged out by the ones with more leadership and interpersonal skills? Tim?
So I think, well, interpersonal and leadership skills, they are becoming more like sought after. I think they're likely to like complement rather than replace procedural knowledge. I definitely feel courts will still require managers who understand like the intricacies of legal processes and operations. I think that's something that you can't just get rid of. However, the ability to lead, communicate effectively, and manage teams is becoming more recognized. So I think as the courts are starting to modernize, I think there's a growing need for strategic leadership and roles that require both, a deep understanding of court operations and the ability to lead diverse teams. So I think those professionals who can strategically position themselves as experts in both areas are going to be better positioned to secure the top management roles. Candidates, with extensive court management knowledge should leverage their understanding of court operations to demonstrate how they can lead improvements and innovations with their knowledge. So I guess, yes, interpersonal skills, like those soft skills, are becoming increasingly important, and they can be hard to teach. It's not like you can necessarily teach empathy. You can set up some trainings, but if someone doesn't have empathy as a natural, interpersonal skill, that is harder to get to. But I do believe realistically they're unlikely to entirely overshadow, the value of procedural knowledge in court management roles. I think candidates who can successfully combine both will likely be the most competitive in this job market.
Jason?
I agree with Tim. Even if that becomes a trend, candidates with court management knowledge who also have strong interpersonal skills would stand out even more. Their practical experience in managing court systems, combined with the ability to communicate effectively, manage conflicts, and build relationships, would be highly valued.
I will say, and one thing I think is good to point out is, someone that has the ability and the desire to be curious, to want to learn, to be teachable, and to be able to pinpoint those weaknesses in themselves. I have a supervisor here who admitted, is a great supervisor, can do all the tasks, lead all the teams, but said, I don't have a natural care to know people. Like, I just not in my growing wheelhouse. And I was kind of like, oh, like that caught me off guard. Like, you're one of my supervisors and you're telling me like you just don't care and you can't figure out why you don't care. You're reading the books, you're doing the things, but they try to find ways to compensate for that. So what they'll do is, for example, if I knew Jamie had 2 kids and those kids were very important to her and she liked to know her dog's name is, Rufus. This manager will write down, Jamie has 2 kids, Bill and Todd, loves it when I talk about Rufus, and will make lists and say, when they go have conversations with those employees, we'll look at her list and say, okay, these are the things that is important to this person. So trying to find ways to overcome and still show that I care, even if at a true heart, I'm not a people person. And doing those things, I think, is very important too. So recognizing those weaknesses and trying to figure out ways to overcome them is important.
With a workplace comprising multiple generations and increased diversity, we're going to be looking for management candidates with enhanced people-oriented skills. What do we look for in a manager who says that he or she is an expert in workplace mediation? How would you check a candidate's background for something like that? Jamie?
So I will acknowledge anytime someone is a self-professed expert, it scares me just a little bit. I have knowledge, I have skills, I'm continuously learning, I'm a student of, those sort of things get me excited, but the expert kind of worries me because I think a lot of folks use it when they think they're done learning, and I don't think that it can ever really happen. That one on its own worries me. That said, how do we find out? So I will tell you that I know in a lot of places, backgrounds are hard because a lot of former employers will tell you the dates they worked there and that's it. So how do you find out? Again, I think it's a lot of what we talked about in the very first question. Get those situational questions. What do the good answers look like? I'm not going to lie. I think the idea of writing down notes about your people, even if you are a people person, but you have too many tabs open in your brain, that's a great idea. So you don't forget what's going on with folks. So I think it's one of those things, it's asking those questions. Tell me about a time when, and then get those sorts of things. Tell me about a time you had a mediation and it failed and what you learned from that, because that's when you start to see that development and the growth, as opposed to only asking for the success stories. And people have to think a little bit harder sometimes for those failures, because we all have them. We don't like to bring them out and talk about them, but learning from them says significantly more than success after success. It's that, you can still learn from success too. So what have you learned in the process of, I think, is a good way to see that development and where they have potential to go in the future.
Hillary?
Yeah, so again, Jamie, you and I very much singing from the same page here. And I would just add, I chuckled when I heard this question, because I've done so many years of management and leadership development training, and not once has anybody said to me, I cannot count even on one finger on one hand, I am an expert in mediation. And in fact, what tends to show up is, Hillary, teach us how to have a difficult conversation, because most of us are wildly conflict averse. And so what we like to do is just assume, I used to do this myself before I got a little wiser, was, oh, they'll just figure it out on their own. They'll see that it's a problem. That never happens either. Now, I suppose, to Jamie's point, in an interview, somebody might say, sure, you want an expert mediator, that's what you're asking for. I'm trained to say yes so that you'll hire me. And that's why I think, and I do this a lot as a coach especially, is let's unpack the labels. What does it mean to be an expert in workplace mediation? Right off the bat, the skills that I would probably name are an ability to be impartial. Can I really make both people or all the people feel like I'm giving them a fair listen? Active listening, which is just about the foundational people skill for any people skill, any other people skill. Can I really process what the people are saying and reflect it back in a way that they feel heard and that they feel like their position has been honored? Courage, because again, we're all conflict averse to a certain extent. So willingness to engage in these situations before they become the erupting volcano, extremely important. And then finally, an ability to reframe. I've been teaching actually a lot, because there's a lot of workplace conflict right now, the negotiation idea of what's the interest underneath the position. And so I might be tempted in an interview to say, how have you helped people find where there are commonalities, rather than focusing on the differences? And again, I'm a big fan of behavioral interview questions, because the research shows past behavior reflects future performance. And this also might be, I think it was Dana, you said earlier that you gave them I'm sorry, I don't remember whether it was Dana or Jamie who did the role plays, where giving people a chance to interact with a scenario and say, how would you handle this, demonstrates the thought process that would underlie what they might label as mediation skills.
Artificial intelligence is promising to create entirely new categories of required job skills. Who ever heard of an AI database integrity analyst 5 years ago? What do we look for when a court is trying to hire someone with AI skills? Do we cultivate from within? And how do we do that? Jason?
As a leader in municipal court, I would always look to hire from within first. An employee with a background in data management or IT might be trained in AI technologies. They already understand the court's operations and could apply AI tools to improve the processes.
Tim?
So I guess that could be a loaded question depending on what we're looking at. Am I hiring somebody for an AI, like an IT role, or some sort of other general court administration, what have you? Because obviously, if you're looking at IT, you would be looking at things like Python, Java, etc. But beyond that, I would say, of course, I do agree that if we can sort of promote within, teach within, grow those skills, grow those professional skills, we would like to do that first. Granted, sometimes there is a nice refreshment when you get somebody from the outside. I am an example of one of them. I've been in my role for 2 years, and there was a lot of internal people that were going for it. So sometimes you do get that. But I think beyond like technical skills, from any type of familiarity with AI applications, especially in like the legal field, would be great. If you know anything about predictive analytics for case outcomes, automated document review, legal research. I think those things will all be highly valuable. Maybe how can AI integrate and enhance anything when it comes to efficiency or accuracy with, ethical standards. We can't, and, we have to look at data security. We can't just go throwing in all these cases into an open AI where it can be accessed by anybody from the outside. So there are some things that I think I would like people to know when it comes to safety, security, ethics. But I think in general, in today's society, we're all aware of AI. We know that it's coming. We know that it's here. And it's still in the early stages, yes, but I would expect people at this point, they should be able to at least go around and play with sites, you know, whatever. There's 100, probably thousands at this point of different AI websites, many different features. And I think at this point, everybody should go on and play around with the websites, get familiar. A lot of these systems are built with the user. So the prompts that you use make a difference in the responses that you'll get back. And I think just sort of being aware of that, I think is definitely something that I would be looking for.
With AI, looking at a culture within your organization to promote experimentation, to promote innovation. And those are the kind of same things that I would look for in a candidate is how have they innovated? How are they looking for that next best thing? Because I'm an early adopter. I come from a long line of early adopters. We had a Betamax, right? So sometimes we make the wrong decisions on our early adoption. And I play with AI often. I bet my husband, I'm like, $20, I can build a bot this weekend. And that was after seeing an Orange County presentation. So, you know, you want to explore what we can do as an organization and really promote that culture of innovation and not being scared of technology. And so when you're looking for someone, do they have that natural curiosity? Because we know in the last year, I mean, look, ChatGPT was what, a year ago-ish when it
Two.
launched?
Mhm.
Two?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's 2 cycles now, 2 years ago. But now look, we've got Gemini, we've got Copilot, and we've got much different technologies coming in as well. And it's going to be changing so fast. So the technology you know today is not the technology you know tomorrow. And it may not be, I mean, I'm the HR director. You think I'm building a bot on the weekend, right? Like, but it's something you have to look for, that curiosity and that willingness to look at what's next. And then also, of course, when you're hiring in the IT space, what is the technical abilities to build those things? Don't have me code. I'm going to ask ChatGPT to code for me.
A widely accepted recruitment and selection adage is past behavior is the best indicator of future performance. Does this mean that previous court work is the best indicator of a successful future court employee? How does this square with us when we're looking for candidates with these new skills? And doesn't this adage conflict with our commitment to diversity? Dana?
You know, past behavior is an indicator of future performance. Hillary said that, and that's a well-known adage, but it's also behavior, right? It isn't always skills or necessity of the certain knowledge base. So when we look at what past behavior is, it is truly the behaviors and doesn't always have to focus on the skill. I think it's a both and. Looking at what people can have from the inside, engaging employees, knowing there's a promotion route, supporting employees on a career ladder is really important for a healthy culture of an organization. And as Tim said, having folks also qualified from external sources is really good for bringing in fresh eyes. So I really think that it is a both and looking at both what you can bring in those skills and what you need in that position. And it's not always the people that know how to process the cases the best, the fastest, that also have those management and mediation skills. So really identifying those things so that it doesn't. To your question about does it conflict with a dedication to diversity? When you know your statistics of your staff, if you are 80% female, you know, you do need to look outside in order to bring in those fresh ideas, but also promotion from within. So, you know, it is a both and, which is an it depends answer.
Hillary?
Yes, again, I would just second everything that Dana said. And that idea of there can be even a literal definition of skills, like court knowledge is a knowledge, but the skills that it would take to process a case, to interact with the public, to inform the public, to make people feel comfortable, judicial fairness, all of those things can be demonstrated through other kinds of work. So it is a both and. And I think the other thing that I did when I was a court trainer was I would say to my people, hey, we can't guarantee that you're upping your game in these areas where we see a growing edge for the court, will ensure that you'll get the job, but it will certainly make you a strong candidate for that job. And so there's a value for sure to subject matter expertise. And I'm here to tell you, when I probably shouldn't say this publicly, but I will. I was a high school English teacher before I got my job at the court. And I said to myself, it's going to take somebody who would believe that I can transfer the skills of teaching adolescents to teaching adults in a court setting. And I worked for the federal judiciary. Thankfully, nobody in my family knew anything about the federal judiciary because we all kept on the right side of the law. And so I didn't have any court knowledge going in. And gratefully, my boss took a risk on me because he said, Hillary has these other skills and she can acquire the court knowledge that she needs to get the job done. And by the way, longest tenure of any position in my career, I lived happily ever after there.
And what advice do you have for court professionals who are joining us today and are facing this changing workforce? Tim?
I think that's another loaded question. I think some of the things that I would say is to, and I think a couple of us mentioned it here, always be curious, always have a mindset of like embracing learning. I mean, we've seen it over as pretty much, the past 100 years, from every revolution to, when talking about industrial revolution, cars, technology, internet. I mean, it's always changing. So if you get a closed mindset, I think that's going to hurt you in the long run. One of the things we always like to say here is like, be curious, don't have a closed mindset, because if you always remain curious, you'll always ask the questions. You'll always assume that people have good intentions. Instead of having, a no or a yes or a very black and white answer, you'll ask the questions, you'll learn more, and be open-minded. I think, we just have to always have a forward-thinking mindset around whether it's AI, culture, just being open, willing to learn, or being willing to be taught, to me is one of the most important things. Because I always say, like, I can teach somebody to type, I can teach somebody to learn calculus, but are they willing to learn? That's the hardest part. So one of the things that I always look for, and when I'm hiring new people, is, are they willing to learn? Do they understand the mistakes? Do they know how to look back and say, hey, I made a mistake, I'm human, I didn't do this well in this mediation, it was terrible actually, but I know now I would do this different. I learned to do this. So I think being aware of that is just, I can't stress that enough for future professionals coming into the field, or in any field realistically.
Jamie?
I think curiosity is amazing. Replace judgment with wonder. Shout out to Ted Lasso. I think the other thing is it's about people and connections. When we talk about AI, yeah, technology is going to do a lot of great stuff, but people are going to put in the information, hopefully, and guide it. And so it's that, be curious, constantly learn, accept you're not perfect. And that's okay. It's okay to say, I don't know. It's okay to say, I need help. It's okay to give people help. It's okay to ask questions, have grace with yourself and empathy for others, and connect with people and realize this is not a one-person party. We're all in it together. And I think that curiosity exists for humans, for ideas, for innovation, for yourself. And then really, when it comes to yourself, is sit down and reflect. The only way, John Dewey says, we don't learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on experience. And so having that time set aside to say, okay, what could I do better? What went well? What do I want to repeat? And doing that as much as you can, not to the point where you're only sitting and reflecting instead of doing, but reflecting and then doing and continuously growing, I think is huge. And again, I think it goes beyond just the court. I think we should do that everywhere, in all places.
Jason?
I would just say, don't panic. These trends present both challenges and opportunities for court professionals. By staying informed and proactive, court professionals can navigate the changes effectively. I highly recommend connecting with a professional organization like NACM for networking and skill development. Some of the greatest things that I've learned have come through that organization. I'm also fortunate that Georgia has a strong court leader organization. They and NACM, like I said, have been crucial to my development as a court administrator. And I would say, stay informed. Don't be afraid of technology. Like Dana said earlier, embrace AI tools. I've had great fun with Chat GPT and going back and forth with friends and seeing those things that it can do. So just, don't be afraid.
Dana?
Or, the be curious is the first thing, but that was taken. So I get to be curious and come up with something else and a little bit more concrete. When somebody comes with a solution or you have a solution in your head, take a step back, walk through what is the problem we're trying to solve, and then involve those affected in that problem in solutioning. And that goes for workforce issues, that goes for talent development. The more ideas at the table and the more diverse group trying to solve that problem rather than starting with a solution, and being curious is really going to make the workforce a better place and make our courts better to serve the people.
Hillary?
So I think that idea that you were just articulating, Dana, is very much, a lot of times people come to me and say, how do I hire for somebody who has more analytical, critical thinking skills, strategic visioning? And all of that is, I think, in all of our answers embedded is this idea of Carol Dweck's growth mindset. Am I willing to say that there's more for me to learn, to be curious about it? And that's why I'm waiting for the day that we rebrand the soft skills label. People are trying and it hasn't stuck yet, but really we're communities of humans trying to accomplish a really important mission and to serve our communities in the rule of law, which is ginormous. And so I think also inviting people into a space of that sense of purpose. The research shows, especially in positive psychology, that we are meaning makers, that it's really important for us to live purpose-filled, meaningful lives. And so inviting people into a conversation about what that could look like in the court. And in addition, a lot of the younger generations are saying the two benefits they value most, not benefits, but what they look for in a job, once you get past the money, which everybody needs to think about, is a place that offers them a chance to develop and grow. And again, that feeds employee engagement, which feeds productivity, so you get a real virtuous cycle going.
I want to thank Hillary Galen, Tim Rupert, Jamie Velasquez, Jason James, and Dana Bartocci for their thoughts and opinions on confronting these new workplace trends and the new workforce that will create them. Watching these trends take shape will be both fascinating and important in the years to come. As always, my thanks to you court professionals tuning into today's episode. Whether you're mastering AI or training on how to deal with conflict in the workplace, you approach every challenge as the professionals that you are. Thank you. Join us on Tuesday, October 15th for another episode dealing with the issues facing our courts. This has been the Court Leaders Advantage podcast series. I'm Pete Kiefer, and thanks for joining us today. Thanks for joining us today. The Court Leaders Advantage is a regular podcast series on courts and court administration. Today's episode will be available on our website, on the Court Leader website, on YouTube, Facebook, iTunes, LinkedIn, and on X, formerly known as Twitter. Become part of the conversation. If you have questions, comments, or ideas for future episodes, email us. Our address is podcasts@nacomnet.org. Did you hear an interesting comment by one of the panelists that you would like to listen to again, but you don't want to search the entire episode to find it? The additional resources section of the webpage has a question time marker sheet. Find the discussion question on the sheet, and next to it is the time that question was asked. You can quickly fast forward to that time and listen to the panelists' comments. Remember, if you don't have time to watch an episode, you can always listen to the audio version. Listen in your car or on the bus on your way to or from work. You never have to miss an episode. I'm Pete Kiefer, and on behalf of our guests, the Court Leader website, and the National Association for Court Management, thank you, and have a great day. The views, information, and opinions expressed during this episode are solely those of the host and the individual presenters. They do not necessarily represent the position of the National Association for Court Management.